Hey Finxters, today I'm going to run through examples that show you how to return a JSON object from a function in Python. First of all, what is JSON? It stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a data format that's widely used, especially for transmitting data between web applications. So let's get started with our first example here. Here I'm going to show you how to use the JSON library, specifically the JSON.dumps method, to convert, or in other words, serialize a Python dictionary into a JSON string object. So here I've imported the JSON library. I've defined a dictionary of key value pairs. Here I'm using the JSON.dumps method. I pass in greetings and output JSON underscore string. So let's run example one. All right, so you can see here that the result here when you print JSON underscore string is the dictionary that we defined. You'll also notice that it includes these little curly braces. Those are actually part of the string. So you'll see JSON underscore string is the is what's output from JSON.dumps. It actually is a string, and it includes these curly braces. All right, I'm going to show you on the next example that you can do the same thing with a Python list. So here I have a list of some of my favorite foods. I pass it into JSON.dumps and output JSON underscore string. Let's run that. Example2.py. Okay, so JSON underscore string again is a string. This time it includes brackets to show that's how we serialized the list, or that's how JSON.dumps serialized the list. Okay, let's go on to example 3. Okay, so now I'm going to show you that JSON.dumps can also handle it if you have information nested within your dictionary. So you can have key value pairs where the value includes a whole list, or you can have key value pairs where the value includes a whole nother dictionary. Okay, so let's try that. Run example 3.py. Okay, now our JSON string, you see how it includes our list, which is the value for key English. It includes this dictionary, which is the value for key another dict. All right, let's check out example 4. Okay, so here I'm going to show you how to use JSON.dumps, and I'm going to show you an option for using JSON.dumps and how to write it to a file. So here I've defined another dictionary. Let's just run it real fast. Run example 4.py. I've imported the library, defined a dictionary where I've got some dictionaries within as the value. I've got some lists in there too. This is a list. Here I've got an integer and a floating point number as some of my values. I've got a string, and I'll show you in a minute that it cannot, JSON.dumps cannot serialize a function or a class or some other complex data types. Okay, so again, we pass in my dict into JSON.dumps, and I'm going to use the indent option. So indent equals 2 here, and I printed that, and then I'm using with open to write the JSON string to the file called myfile.json. Okay, so let's look at the output here. You can see that this looks pretty different than our previous outputs. See, the previous ones, they're all in one line. Even when we had nested dictionaries and lists within our dictionary, they're all on one line. Now when I set this indent equal to 2, it makes it a little bit nicer. It's a little easier to read. So that's kind of a nice feature of JSON.dumps. And you'll see it uses that in this, it writes the same format to the file again here. Myfile.json was just created. Real fast. If I run it again without using indent. Okay, run that guy. You can see it's just not quite as readable. So the indent option really is kind of nice. Let me turn that back on. Okay, and now I'm going to show you what if I try to pass a function in and try to serialize a function. Here I have one written up here, uncomment, pass in my fun, okay, run example 4. Okay, so the error we get is object of type function is not JSON serializable. So it'll do the same thing if I try to pass in a class. JSON.dubs can handle integers, floating point numbers, lists, and dictionaries. Some things it cannot handle are functions and classes. But if you want to use other libraries, such as the JSON pickle library, I believe it's called, you can get it to work so that you can serialize more complex data types. All right, let's move on to the next example. In this example, I'm going to use the Flask module to start creating web applications that use the JSON data format. So here we're going to import Flask, and from the Flask module, we're going to import the Flask class and the JSONify method. Okay, here I'm defining an instance of the Flask class called app. Down here, I'm going to use what's called a Python decorator. It's kind of outside the scope of this tutorial, but just know that decorators are used throughout, are commonly used with the Flask module. And what this is doing here is it's just saying that when you navigate to /books of the little of the web application that we're going to make, it'll always run this return_JSON function. All right, so what happens when we run that function? Well, it's going to define a dictionary of some of my favorite books. It's going to print out that dictionary, and then it's going to print out the result of when I use the JSONify method on that dictionary. And I'm going to save that to a variable so you can see it. And then it's going to return that dictionary. JSONify. Okay. So let's see what happens when I return the JSONified version of that dictionary. Okay, so see, it says it's running this web application right here, which is locally on my computer. I'm going to open that up. Nothing's here. Oh, what if I go to books? There they are. So these are some of my favorite books. It returned, and actually I'll show you exactly what it returned. So if we look at what it printed out here, when we just try to print out the dictionary, it prints out the dictionary as expected. When we try to print out what was passed out of JSONify, it's actually a response object. Okay, so when we return the response object, that gets printed to our web app page here. Okay, I'm going to show you what happens if I remove JSONify. So now I'm just returning the Python dictionary. Okay, let's go here. Once again, we'll navigate to books. And it works. So what's happening is Flask is smart enough to, I'm sorry, this was silly because it's inside the function. Flask is smart enough to return, to handle Python dictionaries. Okay. Now let's see what happens if we try to return a list instead. Okay, so here what we're doing, instead of returning a dictionary, we're returning this Python list here. Run example5.py. Okay, it's running at the same location. Gotta go to books. Oh, there's a server error. So in this scenario, the Flask module can handle dictionaries, but we're actually going to have to JSONify other types of data if we want to display it on the web page. Try it one more time here. Run example5.py. Here we go. Okay, see, so now it will display the list. So there you saw an example of when you need to use the JSONify method. All right, let's move on to example 6. In example 6, we're going to use the request module and the JSON module to actually get JSON information from Web API. Okay, so let's say all of a sudden we needed to know all the astronauts in space and which craft they were on. Luckily, there's an API that lets us do exactly that. So if you go to this web page here, If you go to this web page, come on. A couple APIs defined. One actually shows you all the people who are in space right now and which spacecraft they're on. So, we could write a Python script to update us every 10 minutes, every week, whatever. I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to use the request module, and specifically the request method of the request module. So here I'm telling the request method that I want to send a GET request to this API. It's going to do that, and then it's going to put whatever the response is in this response variable. If the response is not blank, we're going to print the JSON content of that response. To get the JSON content, we're going to use the JSON method of the response object, response.json. And then I'm going to use that to write JSON string to a file using indent. All right, so let's run this guy. I'm actually going to run it, run example 6.py. Okay, so let's just walk through this. First of all, you can see here, print the JSON content is, well, and one thing to note is that the JSON content of this response actually included a little message about whether, it's telling us that our query or our GET request was a success. Okay, so then within the people key, we've got all the people in space right now. That's what we wanted. Once again, it's only formatted on one line. If I go to astros.json, which is the file I just wrote with that information, it's formatted nicely because I used the indent option. Okay, so another thing to note, the response. Remember how earlier we had a response object? That's what's actually being returned when I send this GET request to the API. It's giving me back a response object. Now, what's nice is if you want to write it to a file, the JSON.dumps method can take a response object. Or rather, sorry, I'm screwing it up. So if I do response, what I was trying to say is you can use the JSON.dumps method to format your JSON response if you use the JSON method. So see response.json. Oh, come on now. A equals. I just want to show you what type it is. Okay, so A is actually a dictionary. So when you get when you use the JSON method to get the JSON content from your response, it's going to be returned as a dictionary. Then if you want to serialize that dictionary into a JSON string for writing to a file, you can use the JSON.dumps method, and you can indent things nicely so it's easy to read. All right. That concludes the video tutorial for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and enjoy working with JSON.